H.P. Lovecraft was a racist who didn't like Christmas, so it's pretty weird that he wrote a Christmas story about not liking racists. The festival. I'll preface this by saying that this is all my own personal interpretation of the story, and you should keep that in mind while watching this. It'll be important by the end. Anyway, let's get into it. The story of the festival begins by stating very clearly that it's definitely not a Christmas story, but seeing as the story plays out like a fucked up mix of A Christmas Carol, It's a Wonderful Life, and the dying screeches of 1,000 locusts, we can kind of call it a Christmas story. I mean, it's also snowing, it's about awkward family reunions, religious traditions, and the Necronomicon, so yeah, it ticks all the boxes. Anyway, we're following the narrator, who we'll call the narrator, as he ventures to Kingsport, Massachusetts, which is a fishing town in New England. Now, that may sound like every other Lovecraft town, but this one's different, because it's snowing? The narrator is traveling to Kingsport to take part in an ancient family tradition, a sort of festival, if you will, and he finds himself a little out of his depth. The town is extremely quiet, old, and uninviting, and despite being part of the town's culture and heritage, he doesn't exactly fit in. This makes him think, this is odd. He finds some family members who look, to put it kindly, terrible, and he feels extremely uncomfortable with them, so he instead confides in some books. Rather than going for the sensible choices of literally anything else, he decides to read some of the Necronomicon. After ingesting some of Earth's most forbidden and dangerous knowledge that a sane mind simply could not even begin to comprehend, he thinks, this is curious. He's then guided outside to join the legions of other townsfolk as they eerily approach the town's church. He notices that this crowd of cloaked folks are all physically deformed, or at the very least, physically divergent, and that they leave no footprints in the snow. They also don't say a word, so basically these guys are me, aged 18. This prompts Mr. Narrator to think, this is strange. They then descend down some secret stairs until they reach a cavern full of weird flames, fungus, oily water, and some unspeakable homunculus beasts. This prompts the narrator to think, this is weird. And after seeing the locals ride the flying homunculus beasts into another eldritch subterranean cavern with promises of even stranger things to come, this prompts him to think, this is... I should probably go. He then jumps in a river, passes out, gets found half frozen and delirious in a harbor, and wakes up in a hospital. So basically he's me, age 20. Upon waking up, he finds that the town of Kingsport is not the archaic and isolated place that he had been in previously. It's actually quite modern. So it was all a hallucination, right? No, because he gets his hands on the Necronomicon and finds that he is quite familiar with it already, as he had read it in the alternate and spooky version of Kingsport. Then the story ends, with the narrator learning that, while I am technically one of the weird culty boys, I actually find them pretty disagreeable. So why do I think that this is an anti-racism story? Well, to understand that, you have to know what H.P. Lovecraft's favorite topic was. Himself. Whether intentionally or not, he wrote a lot of things about himself. The most famous example being Randolph Carter, but he also made appearances as Nyarlathotep, the showman who shows humans their own insignificance, Azathoth, both the being and the story as being the creator of the mythos, and many other protagonists who are simply terrified of everything. But the festival is a bit different, because you can view it as being very self-critical. Like I mentioned earlier, Lovecraft was racist. Part of that was from the standard intolerance of the early 1900s, but a lot of it came from his family, who must have held some pretty extreme views if Lovecraft is now considered head and shoulders above his peers in terms of bigotry. But as he got older, his views softened, and he began to, not necessarily denounce, but disapprove of groups such as the KKK and the Nazis. I don't believe he ever fully dropped the racism, but he definitely distanced himself from the more extreme groups. So how does this relate to the story? Well, a man who is, by birth, inducted into an order of seclusion and horror that group up in cloaks and masks to conduct outdated and disgusting rituals, finds that, while he is genetically and superficially involved with these people, he finds the progress of the modern world far more comforting, even if he is alone because of it. Now, the big question, was it intentional? Almost certainly not. Because honestly, there are flaws in this argument, and there are so many other, more relevant allegories that this story provides. But this is how I see it, and I suppose, much like the style of Lovecraft, this video isn't really about the named topic. It's kind of about the person making it. Am I someone who desperately tries to see the best in bad people? Am I someone who overanalyzes everything I read? Am I someone who projects my own beliefs onto others' work simply because I like them? Yes, and yes. Lovecraft lived and died a racist. This story is not some veiled exploration of his secret tolerance, but I read it that way. And when a story makes you think that much, and makes you reconsider some of the fundamentals of your own personality, you know it's a good one. Merry Christmas, everyone. But, more relevantly, Blessed Yuletide.